of all, how are you doing, lovely?
I'm good, thank you. It's a lovely sunny day. It makes so much difference. Cheers you up.
Definitely does. We need that. We need that
Yeah.
now more than ever. So, Janey, for people that don't know, what's been your well-being journey so far, lovely?
Oh my goodness, I wear an awful lot of hats, and it's a long story, but I'll try and keep it short. In short, I wrote my first book, which was called Imperfectly Natural Woman. I must stress the imperfectly bit of that title. And I wrote that, goodness, 15 years ago. And I often kind of say I was a bit ahead of my time because I was kind of talking about, oil pulling with coconut oil and far infrared machines. And I often say I was talking about kale and coconut oil before they had their own publicists. So I was kind of ahead of the curve, right? And amazingly, the book went to #1 on Amazon bestsellers back then when it was really hard to do. So I had my kind of little introduction really into the world of well-being and just how many people there were interested in that journey. And that was a long time ago. And then since then, I've been on the same path, and I have a website called imperfectlynatural.com where I recommend natural and holistic products and services. I have the Platinum Awards every year, which recognizes the best in natural stuff. Along the way, I've written other books. I've written a book with Hay House. I also work with a lot of brands and people who want to get themselves out there. I do kind of visibility training because obviously I'm a radio presenter as well, TV presenter. However, having said all of that, while all of that holistic journey was going on, I was managing to step around the elephant in the room the whole time, which was I was drinking too much. In all those years, I was banging on about being holistic and meditation and all the rest of it. But actually, I wasn't really authentic because I was still drinking too much. And in the last 3 years, I've kind of made it my passion to try and encourage people to ask themselves whether that's their thing. Of course, it isn't everyone's, but I became aware that there was a huge number of people that just hadn't quite asked themselves the right questions around alcohol.
I mean, we'll get into that a little bit later on as well, Janey. But I mean, a lot of your life, and one thing I love about you, you've been kind of on a mission to improve other people's lives. It is a big thing. And of course, to make the right choices, which isn't always the easiest thing to do, is it? So why has that been important for you, first of all?
Yeah, I think I kind of came to all of this quite late. I was in bands. I sang with George Michael and Wham, and I did loads of stuff as a backing singer and kind of, fairly rock and roll for a long time. And then I think what happened to me, if I try and remember back a long way, I think I just had like a little minor illness. I don't even know what it was, something real minor. And I started to realize the importance of what you eat. So that's where it started, as it does for so many people. So I started to look at nutrition and get my head around that. And then the next thing that happened was that I suddenly realized that it didn't really matter how well you eat, or even if you keep fit, if your thoughts are messing everything up, if what's going on in your head isn't right. So I was introduced, relatively early to these concepts, and I started doing, some various bits of research. And then when I had my first son, I had my kids quite late, and I had my first son, he's now 22. So it was when he was born that things really changed. I think that still is the case for a lot of women. They become pregnant. Suddenly they realize, oh my goodness, I'm going to bring another human being into the world. Not only do I care about my own health and well-being and the health and well-being of the baby, but also the planet, because I want there to be something left for them to enjoy. So that's what happened to me. So I had a massive kind of learning curve when my son was born, and at that point I just systematically changed everything. I ditched all the chemicals, apart from the booze. And I started cleaning my home without chemicals. I started using natural organic skincare, everything. I really went into it all in a big way. And then because I was on the radio, I was talking about this a lot. And actually a publisher came to me 15 years ago and said, do you want to write a book on all of this stuff? And for anyone out there sort of listening, thinking, oh, wow, I could never be a writer. That was exactly my words. I said, oh, no, I'm not a writer. And the publisher said to me, well, you know what? You've got some great ideas. Just write them down anyway. We'll help you with the edits. I know you want to share your ideas. So why don't you just write the book? So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And you're right. I am absolutely passionate about encouraging people to make the best of themselves, to live as holistically as possible. It really is my thing. It really
It's
is.
beautiful. Yeah. No, Janey, it really is beautiful. And even like for myself, even, from skincare and ingredients and kind of waking up, we're putting these things and we're consuming so much that might not be good for us, that we just don't know, because we grow up and our mums and sisters and brothers, whatever, they're using what they're using and we just follow that. And it's education and people like you that kind of make us see things that we wouldn't necessarily normally see. So for me, thank you for that. I appreciate
Well, I think it has changed massively. I mean, as I say, when the first book came out, interestingly enough, I'll always remember I was researching natural makeup brands, and there were literally 5. And they were kind of hard to get hold of, right? And look how the market's changed. I mean, it's unbelievable. I do my Platinum Awards, and I try and link up with brands, whether they're big or small. Sometimes it's one woman in her kitchen or one guy making a pot of cream because the other stuff they've tried doesn't work for eczema or whatever it is. So, I love working with small brands as well as big brands. And the market has changed massively. It's incredible now, the choices that people have. But I still think, it comes back to really noticing the ingredients. It comes back to the ingredients ultimately. And most of us are used to looking at the ingredients on our food, and we know to avoid coloring and artificial sweeteners and chemicals and etc. Particularly if you've got kids, you look at the packet, you don't want E numbers, right? But when it comes to skincare and hair care products, so many of us kind of go, oh, well, it says natural on the label, so it must be okay. And even sometimes it says organic. And that doesn't really mean anything. It might mean that there's a less than 0.5% of organic something or other, but then it's mixed in with a ton of other synthetics. So it really is looking for the brands that really follow it through, that the whole ethical picture, right through to all the sustainability, the whole picture. And of course you can make your own. I've got loads of recipes in my books for DIY skincare. You can rustle up stuff in your kitchen.
I love it. I could speak about skincare and makeup. That's where I originally come from.
Is it?
Seriously, it is. Yeah, I used to work in Selfridges for Le Maire many years ago. But skincare, and everything like that. I mean, for me, but the most important thing, obviously, growing up, like you were saying, but the truly organic, the true companies that are pioneering, looking after, the animals, the environment, is so important. And for me, you doing that, I absolutely love it. So, but we'll move on to your book, because I can talk about skincare all day. And even though you are looking absolutely glamorous as well, so it's definitely working for you, Janey. I mean,
no, I think the interesting thing there is, literally, I know we're going to talk about this, but up until about 3 years ago, I was genuinely terrified of getting older. I was so terrified, as a woman who works in the media, and also somebody who, I want to do things naturally. I ain't going to be doing the Botox and all that stuff. It's just not me. And yet I was sort of looking in the mirror and thinking, I am not liking this. I really don't like the way my energy looks. I just felt bloated and kind of something wasn't right, and I remember thinking, everything's going to get worse. Everything's going south, as they say. Well, how is anything ever going to get better? I always remember that feeling of absolute doom. And I know there'll be women listening who feel exactly like that. It's an interesting one for women as we get older. But well, if you want the absolute number one tip for anti-aging, I got it right here, and it's free.
I love it, Janey. I love it. Well, we've got a brand new book out called Happy, Healthy, Sober, Ditch the Booze and Take Control of Your Life, which is out now on ebook and out on paperback on the 11th of February. So what can people expect from the book?
Yeah, so the book it shares my story of how I didn't ever have a rock bottom moment. I think it's important to stress that as well, because, I think in the UK particularly, we tend to think there are 2 types of drinkers. There's those at rock bottom who need alcohol services and rehab. And that's kind of, you've got a little bit of clarity there. If you're in that very, very small percentage, it's kind of obvious what you need to do. But then we tend to think there are those people, and then there's everybody else, and everybody else are just happy social drinkers and who just sometimes can't hold their beer, but that's not the reality. The reality is there's a whole spectrum of what we now know the term is grey area drinkers. And these are people who, just like me, were seemingly completely fine, fully functioning, never having a day off work, absolutely completely fine. But they were waking up at 3 a.m. knowing that they weren't fine. They were trying to sit in meditation, knowing that something wasn't right. You know, there was that voice in the head saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is not authentic with who you are. This is poison. Stop. Right. But then by 6 o'clock the next evening, they're back again. And that was the trap I was caught in. And it's a trap that so many people are caught in. So the book really is talking to grey area drinkers, people who maybe just drink a bit more than they think they want to. Right. And so we have a kind of 30-day challenge in there where I give you all the tips and the tricks to how to make that transition so much easier for yourself, because the brain chemistry is all out of whack when you first stop drinking. But there are things you can do to help it. So we talk about that. So it's for anyone who is sober curious and wants to kind of dip their toes in, or someone who really wants to give this a go. And then after that first section, it's really a lifestyle book, and we go through absolutely everything. And I've got some amazing experts. I thought, you know, I don't want to do it all. I want to get great people involved. So we have Bev Densham in there, who's done a great piece on Pilates. We have some meditation experts. We have Dr. Eric Sigman, who's talking about what alcohol actually does to the body. I've just got so many people in there, and we talk about all different aspects of health and well-being through nutrition and fitness, relationships, finding your purpose, and obviously meditation, mindfulness, NLP, EFT, havening, you name it, it's probably in the book. So because it's kind of everything that I'm passionate about, really, which is being at the top of your game, you know, health and well-being wise, spiritually, emotionally. It's got to all come together.
Beautiful. It's like the jigsaw. That's one thing.
It honestly is. And it was exactly like a jigsaw for me, because I had all those pieces in my jigsaw. I mean, and again, imperfect. I've always been imperfect. I've never got everything 100% right. I don't think anyone does, right? But I had all the bits. I knew all the bits. I really did. You know, I absolutely knew which face cream to buy, and you know, I was kind of on it with the food and the juicing, and but there was a massive hole in the center of the jigsaw that I hadn't known about that piece. Right.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So inspirational, Janey. So, you know, could the book Happy, Healthy, Sober, could it be the first step, you know, in people's lives to becoming maybe sober?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. That's absolutely the aim of the book. I also run the Sober Club, because one of the things that I always recommend is that you get yourself connected, because, you know, knowing other people and being able to be inspired by where other people have got to is important. You know, that lovely phrase, the TEDx talk by Johann Hari, you know, the phrase is the opposite of addiction is connection. And I really believe that's to be true. That's true. I've in fact seen so many people, they fail in inverted commas, if you believe that it is failing. You know, they trip up so many times, but when they get connected and they've got other people to inspire them and they stay accountable, that's when things change. And absolutely, the book can get you from being sober curious to making the choice to be alcohol free. I never use the phrase give up, by the way, because I don't believe you're giving up anything. You're only gaining. So I say ditch the booze, because nobody needs it in their life.
They don't need it. But why do you think, Janey, that it has become, you know, such a habit and maybe such a crutch for so many people? Why?
Well, because if you think about it, you know, it's so completely normal in our culture. It's the societal glue that sticks everything together, you know, it's the kind of rite of passage when we're teenagers. You know, you have your first drink, and you're expected to do that. It's seen as completely normal. And then it's the glue that holds everything, literally, from play dates to weddings, you know, funerals, everything, you name it, it has alcohol involved. And the mummy culture, goodness, the mummy wine culture is huge. So you know, it's been glamorized, is the bottom line. Alcohol has been glamorized in this country, across everything, across every bit of the media, across every event. It's just always seen as the norm. There's another lovely phrase for you, you know, that I can't claim ownership of, but most people know the phrase: alcohol is the only drug you have to justify not taking. I mean, isn't that powerful? You know, when you stop smoking, people go, God, well done you, good on you. And when you stop drinking, people say, oh dear, did you have a problem? How bad did it get? You know? Because it's hard, you know, you're shining a light on other people. So one of the things that makes people nervous of stopping is what other people will think, you know, the sober shamers. But you have to get over that, because ultimately fortunately, there is a wonderful revolution going on, and things are really changing. The rise of the sober curious and the mindful drinker. Look at the range of alcohol-free drinks on the market. Unbelievable. Who'd have thought you'd have had Heineken Zero and Gordon's alcohol-free gin on mainstream, advertising? It's very cool. So things are changing.
Yeah, it's good. And it's obviously a step in the right direction. But of course, with 2020, 2021 being the way that it's been with the pandemic, do you think people could be drinking more now than ever before?
Oh, 100% they are, yeah. And drinking at home, as well, which in some ways is worse. There's no limits on it, literally. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had clients and sober club members who were doing well. They were just getting on the path, and then the lockdowns hit, or they get made redundant, or some other stress. And God knows there's so much stress in people's lives. And if you're not careful, yeah, you can head right straight back down that slippery slope. I definitely think it's had a massive effect. But I think, if you can catch sight of, when you're trying to make any kind of behavior change, as there's two aspects really. That one is the moving away from this pain that you've got, this, oh my God, this has to change. I feel terrible. I must stop. There's that kind of pain point and that knowledge that you've got to do something differently, because if you don't, you'll get sick or whatever. But then, and that's very powerful. Of course it is, that logic. And I always encourage people to do as much reading and do as much, research as they can around the fact that alcohol is really bad for you, because our society would tell us otherwise, right? There's always tons of articles saying, oh, a glass of red wine is good for the heart. We managed to not read the bit that says, in moderation. I used to think, yay, bring it on, So doing your research around the logic that alcohol is bad for you is a good thing to do. And then that will help you with that kind of pain point, knowing that you need to stop this and move away. But what's much more powerful than that is the motivation and the inspiration of a better life without any. And that was the bit that no one had ever told me about. I didn't know about that. I genuinely didn't know that there's a whole unbelievable sober world that is totally inspirational and rocking it. Until 3.5 years ago or whatever, just over 3 years ago, I had no idea that there were all these really cool sober badass types. I just didn't know. I didn't know it was the best anti-aging secret ever. I didn't know how much better life could be without it. So that's the really cool bit, when you can catch sight of that inspiration and a better life, and that's your motivation right there, and you move towards that. So rather than just kind of trying to focus on willpower and, oh my God, I must give up, which just feels as though you're depriving yourself of something that actually you really want. Rather than that, spin it on its head and just ask yourself, could my life be better physically and emotionally without any booze? And if a little voice inside says, hell yes, then try that.
Definitely. So, I mean, of course, with lockdown, spin it on its head a little bit. Could lockdown be a good time for people, to quit alcohol if they want?
It's the perfect time. It's the absolute perfect time, because you don't have the added pressures of social occasions. You can give yourself the time. Most people can, have some control over their day, where they, more than usual. So you absolutely can give yourself the time to put the self-care in place. So yes, you will need to go for walks in nature. Yes, you will need to write in a journal. You might need to go to bed super early with a cup of cocoa. So what? Do what it takes. Get through the hard bit. Okay, and get inspired and get connected online and do the bits you need to do without having to have the pressures of meeting friends in a bar or whatever, which you'll have to face at some point. But if you can get past the hard bit without that, then yeah, lockdown has been a blessing for many people in that respect.
Yeah, it's a good time for people if they want to quit as well. And you've got your podcast as well, which is your alcohol-free life podcast. So what was the inspiration for that, Janey?
Yeah, so again, I one of the things that really helped me massively in the early weeks and months was listening to podcasts, and that piece that I was talking about, that inspiration. I was listening to people on these podcasts talking about being a year sober and being 2 years sober and being 3 years sober, and I was only 3-4 weeks, and that's what kept me going, because although I didn't feel great to start with, I kept one after the other, I kept hearing people talk about this amazing life without booze, and it just kept me inspired. So when I'd kind of exhausted every podcast going, I thought, you know what, I've worked in radio for years, I have access to amazing guests and authors, and why don't I just do my own? So yeah, it's almost 2 years old, the podcast. So I've just been so fortunate. I've had some amazing guests on there, and I hope it's a really amazing slice of inspiration for people every week. And again, rather like the book, we cover so many different aspects on the podcast. Everything from, I have got a shaman talking about movement medicine, through nutritionists, meditation, people talking about meditation. I've got a grief expert coming on. I mean, there really is a massive variety, because as I've kind of stressed before, once you do ditch the booze, or once you do get on that path, then it starts to open the door to all sorts of other areas. It's so amazing when you see people, they ditch the booze, and then suddenly they start to want to get well, and they start to want to think about spirituality and finding their purpose, sometimes for the very first time.
Which could only be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I love doing the podcast. It's a bit of a labor of love. I'm sure you know how that feels.
No, it's beautiful too. And that's the one thing about, regardless of podcast, YouTube show, whatever, it's about the guests like yourself. You always learn so much from them. And
yeah.
Even though if you think, sometimes when you sometimes don't want to do an interview or you can't be bothered, but even though when you do it, then after it, you're like, I'm so glad I did it. I'm so glad, because there was this and there was that. So it's very special to do. So, I mean, Janey, for yourself, so how has quitting alcohol for you? How do you think it's transformed your life?
Oh, goodness. You'd need hours to go through it all. It's all the usual benefits that you would expect, that your skin gets clearer and you get sober hair. Who knew? Maybe not in lockdown. But it does give you nice shiny hair. So all those physical benefits, sleep is a million times better than it ever is. Waking up sober, man alive, it's the best thing ever. So all of those kind of physical things, your weight tends to regulate. I didn't lose a ton of weight, but eventually over time, I think settled back into a more natural weight. But the interesting thing is, by the time I'd lost a bit of weight, I loved myself a bit more. So it didn't matter so much, which I think is a big thing for women. Often they're holding on to their extra weight with such force. But actually, really, it just comes down to they feel they aren't enough, Anyways, so there's all the physical stuff. And then it just gives you, far less anxiety. I didn't even realize that I was a particularly anxious person until I wasn't. It's really quite incredible. The link between alcohol and anxiety and depression, it's unbelievable. Why it's not talked about more, I just can't get my head around it. And I'm not saying, obviously, that if you stop drinking, you will automatically cure depression. I'm not saying that, obviously. But there's no doubt alcohol exacerbates any problems, and over the years, most of us have not been used to dealing with our emotions at all. We just numb out, right? We're just used to numbing out. So it does make everything, you live your life in glorious technicolor. That does mean that you still sometimes have crap times, right? Because that's life.
Yep.
But you do start to learn to be able to kind of sit with your feelings. It definitely makes you kinder. There's no doubt about that. If everyone quit the booze, the world would be a very different place, because it definitely makes you kinder. You're much more present. So within relationships, or if you're a parent, the difference is huge. And then in terms of your kind of personal energy, and I don't just mean physical energy, I mean your motivation, your mojo, the difference is massive. I've seen people in the sober club who, they kind of join the sober club and they're all fragile and their lives are really quite small and inward looking. And my goodness, within a few months, they've started a charity, or they've written a book, or just everything changes. You literally watch them blossom. It's quite amazing. Really, the best way to answer that question is there isn't anything that ditching the booze doesn't improve.
Wow. Janey Lee Grace, I've got to say thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to hear about you, your new book, Happy, Healthy, Sober. Good luck with it as well.
Thank you. It's been so lovely to chat to you.
You too, like an old friend. Absolutely love it. All right, Janey. Well, thank you so much, sweetie. Always a pleasure.
Take care.
Bye, darling.